Hey everybody, it's Jork. Welcome back. Hope you're doing great wherever you are in the world. Today, I've had a number of people, a number probably close to 20, just in the last 24 hours. I'm making this video day after there was an attempt on former President Trump in the U.S. By a gunman. Several subscribers wanted me to talk about gun violence in Portugal, and I'm not, like I said, I try to stay away from politics. I don't know enough about guns here in Portugal. What I can tell you is from being here almost 5 years, it does appear, or at least more gun violence is being reported in newspapers or on the television. So I don't know if there's more acts of gun violence happening or if it's just more of it is making the news or leading the newscasts. Again, I come from the U.S., so I think the mantra long before I was born is if it bleeds, it leads. It's a terrible thing to say, but I think that's a cliche that's been used for media, especially U.S. media, for decades. So, what I can tell you is I don't know the process. For example, people have asked me to make a video on how to acquire a firearm in Portugal. I'm not going to make that video, and I don't know how to, but obviously people do because there is gun violence here. And it seems like it's been ticking up post-pandemic from 2022, 2023. Now we're about halfway through 2024. It does seem like at least in when reading the newspaper, part of it is I know a little more of the language, and so when I'm watching the news, I can listen and I understand a little bit more what's being said. But it does seem like there's more violence in general happening. Oddly enough, just in the last few months, there have been several dismemberments of people. So however they were attacked, whether it be by gun or knife or something, or machete in a couple of cases. That's a little gruesome, and that's something that you don't see on the travel and leisure page about how great it is here in Portugal. But it is a reality. I mean, there's going to be violence in every country that you visit. Portugal is no different. Specifically, if you're coming from the U.S., it may throw you off when you see, 3 people were killed by gunmen because you might have the expectation when you come to Portugal that there either are no guns or it's extremely hard to get one. I believe it is still very hard to get a handgun. I believe like rifles for hunting and those purposes, farms, that would be a fairly normal thing to have. But as far as a handgun, I don't know the process. For example, if you were to Google, we're in Lisbon, if you were to say firearm or gun store, I don't know if any pull up in Lisbon, and I don't necessarily know where you would go get one. It's not something I've ever thought about. Whereas where we were in Phoenix, Arizona, if you type in gun store, there might be 20 spots that light up in the Google Map search on where you can go. But it is something that more and more people are talking about. We have several friends. Most of our friends are from the UK, and they're either British, I mean, they're from the UK, or they're Indian and had moved to the UK for work, and now they've retired here in Portugal. And they get thrown off because when they see that, and often it went from, let's say, once a month you'd hear about something to now weekly you're seeing an article or watching something on the news. They start equating things because they will contact us because somehow, because we're in the US, they assume that either we know a lot about guns, which I don't, or we somehow are experts in gun control or gun safety, which we're certainly not. But as far as commenting on this, I just want to let people know that, you're going to see news reports where there is gun violence. It's minimal when you look at per capita. So when they usually once a year, they'll do some annual statistics, crime statistics. and gun violence is still far down the list of things that can happen here in Portugal. Um, Sadly, domestic violence seems to be the top thing, or one of the top two things that goes. And considering how unreported or underreported that can be, that sometimes can be alarming, because you always, I make the assumption that there's far more of it going on than reported, because around the world it doesn't get reported as accurately. But with the gun violence, it does seem like when there's something that happens, it does get reported. I'm assuming it gets recorded. But it is something that you deal with. I would say where we live in the Lapa Estrella area of Lisbon, so we're kind of a little west of the main city center area, haven't had to deal with anything. The closest thing that's happened in our time here is about 4 blocks away from us is the Tagus River, and we can't look at it, but if I were to look right outside our apartment and look towards the river, right along the river, there's a series of buildings that are dance clubs or nightclubs, whatever you want to call them. But I think they go to like 3, 4 in the morning. But there's several of them along the river, and there's been gun violence at almost all of them that are open in front of us in the time that we've been here. So that's something, and a reason we know is one, either you can hear it or it shows up in the news the next day or a couple of days later. And I would say if you're in downtown Lisbon, a place that is a high tourist center, that I want to end this video, that I want you to just think about, is Cais de Sodre. It's a metro, train, and ferry stop. So it's a major point. It's near the Baixa area. It's across the street from the Time Out Market, which is probably one of the top 10 most visited food-related tourist attractions in the city. And it's right along the water. It's beautiful. But there is monthly, I would say, if not more than that, at least what I could look up in newspaper and research and articles, shootings or shots fired in and around the station. And what I mean by that, it's a pretty big station because there's a ferry building. Then there's a second building that you take steps down to go to the metro, or you have trains that take you all the way to Cascais or back. That area is one that I would be cautious of at night. During the day, I don't recall any of these articles or anything happening during the day, whether it be festival season in June or partying or even after like a football match or anything. It's generally been at night and sometimes middle of the night where you probably wouldn't be there anyway. But that's an area that I would just make sure, because there has been repeated articles and repeated newscasts from doing stories there over the years, that's an area that late at night you probably don't want to be in unless you have to go through there to get to someplace or get through to someplace else. But that's it. It happens everywhere. I think many countries that have guns, there's going to be gun violence. Portugal's no different. It still, again, amazes me because of how hard it seems like to be able to get a firearm or get a handgun, that these things happen. But they do. Not sure the reason why. I don't know who owns them, or sometimes they don't always identify who the perpetrator is of the act, which is fine. So you don't know, is it someone that's Portuguese? Is it an immigrant, or what the status is of someone? Not that that matters. But it does happen. So it is something that if you think, for example, if you're leaving the U.S. and you're not going to see any stories about that, you're sadly mistaken. So it's part of life here. It's not, it doesn't lead the news every day. But I can tell you in 2024, there hasn't been a week that has not gone by where there hasn't been some sort of gun violence reported either in the newspaper or one of the main channels. As always, hope this gives you some information. It's just to give you some background, and based upon some of the subscribers that wanted me to comment on I don't have any comment about, I hope with former President Trump he's okay. But it's going to happen. Wherever you're going to have guns, you're going to have potential issues, and Portugal is not immune to that. So, as always, thank you so much for watching, and enjoy your travels.